Hello, and welcome to a Bon Mott's production of
MOTSterpiece Theater,
where we review critically acclaimed cinema spanning the breadth of human filmmaking.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Spoilers, mature content, inappropriate language. Join us.
MOTSterpiece Theater.
Hello, and welcome back to MOTSterpiece Theater. My name is Steve-O, or Steve Ramosi, and I'm here with J. Ian Manzer.
Hello.
Scott Thurlow.
Or Porkins.
And Chris Morgan.
Red 5 standing by.
And we are talking about Star Wars, later named A New Hope.
It's just, we're going to go by Star Wars.
A New Hope is not in the version that we watched tonight.
That's true.
So
I'm going by Star Wars AFI, parentheses, 1977.
Hey, Lucas, the only thing we asked you to do
was
is
not
adapt,
to fuck it up.
because this is I'm glad to have it, but this is the motherfucking copy you left from the VHS. Mm-hmm. We want something that's going to fit on our HD TVs, brother. Oh, it's Disney we're talking to right now, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Mickey Mouse, get your shit together.
I love the immediate rant that we got into.
Sorry, I had to express.
Suck on that, George Lucas.
Listen, I've been building
Which
that
we
up
know
for
you're
years. Now I have a forum for
Sure.
it. So,
May I interrupt you for
Ian,
a second?
you may.
I just want to mention this, that we are discussing Star Wars the film in a vacuum, an isolation of just the one film. So there is no going back and arguing what George Lucas has done later in his career.
Retrospective analysis.
All the fuck-ups that he made.
I'm not talking about
matter.
the special editions. I'm just talking about I want that original film.
Nor does the trilogy count.
You literally have it.
I know I have it, but
That's what we watched.
Whatever.
Sorry.
But, that's just the trilogy doesn't count. It's just Star Wars.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's the caveat.
And also, my caveat is that we're also viewing it, other listeners and fans may have caught our series on Hero 1000 Faces, so we're tying it into the hero cycle that Star Wars seems to modernly exemplify in terms of all of that.
And my slight caveat is that we watched this tonight and we played a drinking game.
That
to
is
it.
also true.
So your mileage may vary, I guess. Anyway, we're going to start off with intro, body, conclusion, because we neglected to talk about a log line this episode.
Star Wars, man. Like, who doesn't know? Like, I don't have a log line. Does anybody have?
Yeah, no, I don't
think
think it's necessary.
It's not.
Which is why I'm just going to jump into intro, body, conclusion. And Scott, I'm going to throw it off to you.
Alrighty, yeah. So as I said, I was just saying precast that, again, yes, having watched it, or at least trying to force myself to watch it in a vacuum, taking it for what it is, without any other baggage, if you will, attached to it, I'm probably going to give it a 2 out of 3 for intro, body, conclusion. And probably I'll take the points I'm taking off. Maybe the intro, like a bit of the intro, because it's sort of a double-edged sword. I understand they have to set things up, and the hero's journey doesn't really begin until like maybe Act 2 traditionally, if we're cutting up into acts, which means there's a lot of exposition, which yes, it's necessary, but is it like necessarily engaging? Like trying to remove myself from knowing like what, having seen this movie so many times and knowing exactly what the plot is. Yeah. So like it's like if you saw this movie somehow with fresh eyes, if you have never seen Star Wars and went into it, you might be like, what the hell is all this shit? Like who's like they give you some information. Yeah, sure, you have the famous opening title scroll and all that, but you're like watching a bunch of characters do a bunch of like space stuff that may not be engaging. Is all I'm saying. It might not be like grabbing, arresting initially.
That's a weird argument to make because of not only amount of time. I grew up with Star Wars. I've seen it.
We all did, I think.
Sure.
Very, very many amount of times that I could likely quote the movie from front to back. Like some people.
That was part of the drink.
Which was a lot of our drinking game. Indeed.
But here's the thing: is that you can't, as you just mentioned that like you're judging it through worn eyes. That you can't judge it through fresh eyes.
I'm attempting not to, at least. But you're right.
Here's the thing: is you're saying that like. All the exposition they're giving me is so boring because I know it already. That's what I just got out of what you said.
Kind of. Like, you're right. Like, what I meant to, like, at least what I was trying to convey is that I was trying to remove all the baggage. So, yes, even though I know, like, what it all, like, relates to and means, I was trying to put myself into a person's shoes who had never seen this, like, going with fresh eyes. And is it interesting? Maybe. but I'm not sure if it's grabbing enough until like the film sort of kicks into gear.
So to me, that's a harsh thing to say, considering that this is one of the like
I understand.
It's hard to say that, considering when you saw this movie for the first time. Was that even? I mean, granted, you were probably very small. Like,
could I view it through the lens?
But was that even a thought in your mind where like you were like, I don't know what's going on, or like I don't think that this is engaging? I'll tell you this: when I first saw this movie when I was a kid, and still to this day, to some extent, I really love everything that's going on. Yes, when we were watching it, we did
MSTK it a bit.
Yes,
sure,
a decent amount, but. At the same time, like, we've all seen it a bunch of times, and that's somewhat to be expected. Like, we don't need to pay full attention to the movie and, like, hang on every line of dialogue to know what's going on, because we've already seen it.
I'll say one more thing. You actually asked 2 questions there, which I think are somewhat... It seemed to me you sort of lumped them together. Mm-hmm. Did I know what's going on, and was I interested? I could see myself as a kid, like, being interested, even though if I didn't know what's going on. You know what I mean? So I get that. I'm just saying, like, they're somewhat of a... You can't lump them together. My argument is only that it's a strong 2, yes, but I don't think I'm going to give it 4 points, even with trying to cut up or ignore the baggage and my my bias and my nostalgia and my knowledge of this film.
Well, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Because we have lumped intro, body, conclusion together, and made this a 3-point question.
Conglomerate, yes.
But are you willing to say which part of that you are not willing to give full credit to?
Yeah, the intro.
All right, so you don't think the intro was...
It's a bit slow, maybe a bit like sort of like it takes a while to get to like to put all the moving parts together. Which yes, I understand you have to set up some parts. It's just that again, trying to view it the way we've been recently viewing things narratively, is that it may, like I said, a strong 2, but it may lose a little bit of points just because of that. That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
that's all.
All right, I'm not going to argue with that.
I'm going to go back to my old shtick and say I was 7 years old and actually saw this in 1977. Mm-hmm. I know, but the thing is...
everybody drink.
Yeah. You kind of fucking
Chris was in the Star Wars, everyone.
Yes.
We told Chris this was going to happen, that we would drink when he mentions that he saw it in the theaters.
Someday we're going to fucking do this, and I'm not going to be able to... We're going to see a movie that before I was born.
Sure.
From like the 30s.
In 1917.
Eat shit.
Anyway.
But anyway. No, but the thing is, I have, in 40 years, never... It just starts off with it's a period of Civil War is brilliant. The whole thing is brilliant. From the introduction, I mean, it has never ceased to amaze me. Sometimes I'm still like, I can't believe, like, how good the cinematography is. And the dialogue isn't the best, but it's very tongue-in-cheek, and we'll get to dialogue anyway. My whole point is, from beginning to end, in 40 years, I've never not been engaged.
All right.
I agree with that. And,
so I'm getting a 3.
And
That's fine.
I'm glad that you brought that up. Like, honestly, I like the intro, the
setup,
the cinema intro.
Yeah.
But I think that everything else being equal, or everything else being withheld, I think I would have to give this a good score on the intro just based on the scroll. That
exactly.
is so iconic and so...
Sure, it's a strong part. I'm not saying I take all points for that.
And it's iconic for a perfectly good reason. Like, it's not like, this like caught on with somebody and it became iconic. No, the intro, the beginning scroll that they have in this movie is amazing. It's really good.
Yeah.
Like, we read it again. Like, we were joking while we were reading it, but like
against that,
just the way that it's set up, just the like, it's so different than anything it can be before, and also it sets up the movie perfectly and gives you this like huge exposition dump in a way that's not like annoying, I guess.
You're right about that. Like,
I mean, there is exposition, but it's also wrapped in the action. It's not like there's huge exposition dumps with nothing else going on.
Well, I'm just talking about the scroll. Which
I'm
not purely exposition.
I'm not saying the scroll isn't iconic.
It's purely exposition, but I also really like the way that it's done. Like, if you're going to do pure exposition, that's the way to do it.
But like, there's like colorful things
I'll
like
with that.
sinister, like when he's like, the Empire's sinister agents. I mean, just putting that
the
sinister
phrasing
in
of it.
Yeah, it's
sure.
I don't know if that falls into dialogue or not, but
maybe style. But
and there have been much worse opening scrolls in later Star Wars movies for
but
sure.
we're watching this. We're talking about this in the vacuum, right?
At least attempting to.
You're
sure.
right. You're right. I'm
Sure.
sorry.
But
Yeah.
like again,
Mubby.
I don't disagree with you, Steve-O, for sure. Like, yes, the scroll is like iconic and very effective. It's very arresting initially, like grabs you right away. But all I'm saying is like, having viewed it now this recent time, some of the intro beyond after the scroll, past the scroll, could
Sorry, Chris is being
yes, I know, could somewhat.
ridiculous.
I'd say like I know I use this term often enough on movie reviews, but a little bit like they have to. This movie has to set up a number of things initially, so
It does.
that's why I'm taking points off. That's all. Just yeah, sure, like a minimal point off here and there, but still, I'm going to give it a 2 out of 3 for that
So
for this
you would
question.
rather them have not set up things, or
It's almost like they're setting up too much. Like it's a simple story where it seems like the setup is more than is needed to me. Again, that's how I sort of like
Okay.
that thought came across my mind when we weren't like making jokes and like quoting the movie, and I was
Well,
trying to seriously analyze it.
We've gone over the intro quite a bit at this point. Let me just break out of that and say I thought that the rest of this movie, and yeah, I've seen it a bunch of times, and like it's kind of like old hat at this point, but
But it's a classic
body
series.
and the conclusion are both terrific.
Yes,
and
Agreed.
which I'm giving a 2 for.
The conclusion is such a weird thing in this movie because it's one of the first movies, if not the first movie, that made like a very obvious
Sequel bait hook.
beat. Like yeah,
Sure.
it was super obvious, and it was just like we're ending this movie. There are a lot of things that are not answered right now.
Threads are not wrapped
Yeah,
up.
but
yes.
the thing is also, in a lot of ways, if they never made a second film, this could it told its story.
It still stands on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
set up. It's set up
Sure, I agree.
threads, but it didn't. If you didn't answer them, that was left to your imagination.
So, to that point, this is heavily based upon Joseph Campbell's Hero of 1,000 Faces and other works of his. Like, George Lucas is heavily influenced by it. The hero's journey, which Luke goes on over the course of Star Wars and over the course of the entire trilogy, it's very interesting in analyzing as a myth because I know you can watch on YouTube breakdowns of the entire trilogy as the whole hero's journey, but there's a cyclical nature to the hero's journey, and Star Wars can be seen as both a subsect of the greater one and its own unique one that allows the second stage of or the second.
I agree. That's
cycle
well
of the
said.
hero's
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
So you're right about that, Chris. Like it is a standalone myth.
Absolutely. So I guess let's just call it at that.
Well,
Let's say, and like, what? So, what are you guys giving it? Scott,
I'm giving it a
2?
3.
Seems like everyone is giving it a 3 except for me, and I'm giving it a 2.
You're giving it
Yes.
a 2. I'm giving it a 3.
Like I said, like it's
Ian, I'm not sure about your answer.
I'm giving it a 3.
it's a minimal deduction, but still it's significant enough to equal a 2 out of 3.
That's fair. That's fair.
So that's all.
All right,
Let's
so
move on.
we're gonna run on to themes with Chris.
This is one of those films where I see like a lot of themes running through it. Is the way. Okay, we're all going to be in the Mapapka, the Mid-Atlantic pop culture thing.
Shameless plug.
Mapaka.
Come see our talk set.
It is. We're all doing something else, and
Sure.
we're in Philadelphia. But no, my whole point is there's something I'm going to get into there that's been foremost on my mind, and it's how characters deal with the situation. Like one of the themes is dealing with tragedy. Luke has his tragedy. With his
Luke
aunt,
Swanning is the thing.
well, yeah, but the thing is the death of his aunt and uncle. Obi-Wan's confronted with his past. Princess Leia has to
Deal with the death of her entire planet.
has to gamble her planet and move on from that. I mean,
and does unsuccessfully.
and loses.
no. Well, I'll get to that later.
Sure.
But no, I mean that's just one of the things, is like dealing with adversity, dealing with tragedy, and learning to move on and having to go for the greater goal. So I mean that's one of the things. I mean you could go into courage and
I think that's an interesting thing, and I think that Leia's dealing with the death of her entire planet, which she was a princess of, could have been a huge theme, but was completely
Almost
ignored
like cast
in this
aside.
movie. a really interesting move.
Well,
a really interesting move, I guess.
I mean, honestly, you had a pacing and you had a 2-hour movie. You couldn't explore it the way you could if it was a longer movie. But
They never do. They have 3 movies to do it in, and they don't do it at all.
Sure.
But watching it in a vacuum, there's 2 things that I noticed. Is number one, when Tarkin's like, threatening her home planet of Alderaan, she's like, he's like, give me the rebel base, or destroy a planet. And she looks over her shoulder like, there's my planet. I'm about to play this card. And then she said, Dantooine, on Dantooine. He's like, we'll get to this in dialogue. But the thing is, right before, it's the second look she gives. It's like she can't believe that he's, part of her can't believe it.
He's a real piece of shit.
Yeah, but
they're actual space.
My whole point is they didn't have too much time to, let's say, really explore it with her. But I think it was important to have those looks. I mean, honestly, I do.
So here's the thing. I agree that they, in a small amount of time, tried to make those looks
meaningful,
important, meaningful,
impactful. We'll say, sure.
Good word. But to say that they didn't have time to deal with it is such a cop-out.
I mean,
it's such a cop-out. It doesn't.
They could have made time.
Honestly, that doesn't matter because it could have been a huge theme in this movie, but it wasn't, and that's not what they were focusing on.
Well, they had moved over to Luke at that point.
I'm going to go.
But because she's ending up comforting him over Obi-Wan, rather than, like you said, in the robot chicken, she's like, motherfucker, I just lost my entire planet,
Well, exactly. Like I think this was like an oversight in the writing process,
script,
to be honest.
maybe,
but that's not. It's not that big of a deal. It's still it was looked over for following the
exactly
the script.
That's what I'm getting to.
What a myth is, basically, and I think that's what happened. And you know what, I'm not. It's a funny thing to mention. It's not.
It's amusing to think about.
It's not like it destroys the movie or makes it worse. It's just like, that's something that somebody would be really fucking upset about if this was following what they were actually thinking.
But look at her. As one of the leaders of the rebellion, she has to gamble on the fact that, it's like she has to buy as much time for the rebellion. I mean, she's got to take some chances because at some point the Empire is going to be like, well, if you don't turn yourself in, we're just going to keep destroying planets, and get, the galaxy.
Sounds like you're making excuses.
Leia's a strong, pragmatic woman. But the role she plays here is not the leader of the rebellion. It's not to be Princess of Alderaan. It is to play the role of the goddess in mythology.
Yeah,
which is why
exactly.
Every time you see her, she is draped in white. She has a mystical sense about her.
An aura.
And in a sense, I think the idea is that in that role of the goddess, she is not strapped down to or she's not judged by the same morality that we have. She plays this kind of ethereal creature.
That's a very good point. Like, having just read Hero with a Thousand Faces, this makes a lot more sense.
You can see it in that light more clearly. Yeah.
Just looking through it as like she is playing the role of the goddess. She's not the hero of this story. Luke is, and if she was the hero of the story, you would probably see a lot more of her mourning for her lost people. But the fact is that she has a different role to play in this.
But she's more
her concerns are sort of like waylaid. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
At least, and this is part why I find the introduction so strong is she develops actually. I mean, she could very easily have been a damsel. She could have been a plot device.
Sure.
She could have done all this.
She
without
was a plot
any
device, but becomes an actual character.
But she was actually.
But she's badass because she's the fucking goddess.
But my whole thing is, I think she becomes a character before she becomes the plot device.
She's more Artemis, than. The Greek god that came out of Zeus's head, the goddess, and there's the one that benefits war and knowledge and intelligence. A very strong female character.
I know. Athena, perhaps, is what you want.
And that is her characterization.
Hunt, right?
No, that's Artemis' Goddess of the Hunt. She is the goddess.
See, we've absorbed so many myths here.
But you could see her. She's a military leader. She's willing to sacrifice in order for a greater good.
Right.
Like, this is this is the characterization she takes up, and like again, she's not in a sense a real. She's a character, but she's not meant to be a real person in a way. I don't.
At least not in this movie.
I
So
what you mean?
That's a good distinction.
Again, we're not supposed to bring up the other movies, but she definitely gets fleshed out more later. But like this movie,
Within this one, she serves that role.
I would say,
right.
Like she doesn't really have a character arc in this film.
She has a small one, but certainly not as big. Like, and I'm going to bring up, like, if we're talking about themes still, which I think we are, as like perhaps a simple but obvious one, where it's like good versus evil, like the rebellion against tyrannical rule.
Yeah,
it's like a very like classic dynamic. The Empire is overtly evil, and the rebellion is attempting to overthrow their rule to achieve at least a more peaceful unity throughout. And that's sort of why, like, to your point, E, that's sort of why Leia's, we could probably speak about her maybe in secondary, but she serves that little niche role, and that's why you don't get as much of her, like, psychology, if you will, I suppose. She's one of, like, the, if Luke has, like, two little helpers on his shoulder, Obi-Wan is one, and she's sort of the other.
Is she the devil or the?
No, like
he's got two angels on her shoulder.
Yeah, I know that's classic imagery, but I'm just saying, like, two. He has mystical help from both ends, if you will. She being one of them. But I'm just saying, like, in terms of the as we said, the theme is to basically Lucas knew Joseph Campbell. In fact, was friends with him. He viewed him as a mentor, and said he basically set out to create a modern myth, if you will, with Star Wars.
Go on.
I've been commenting on your guys' points of view. I would just like to have less than 5 minutes.
Hit me.
Just run through the myth cycle and the monomyth describing this and what goes into this work. So of course you have the Call of Adventure, which I think comes at when he receives the droids and sees
he finds the message from Leia.
He gets a call to adventure. That's supposed to go to Ben Kenobi.
The call to adventure.
But and he does seek out Ben Kenobi, or at least seeks out Robot, and he refuses the call initially, which leads him to return home, see his aunt and uncle murdered by the Empire, and then Ben Kenobi is the supernatural aid that provides him with the boon of the lightsaber and the idea of the Force. This leads to them leaving Tatooine, which when they're in Mos Eisley, it's like the crossing of the threshold.
Yep.
And he's fighting with like the threshold guardians who are both the Imperial stormtroopers.
Yep, exactly.
And the scum and villainy.
Of course, yes.
Yep.
They end up going on the Road of Trials, which they're captured in the Death Star. And they're in a trash compactor, which, if that's not the belly of the whale, I don't know what is.
I think you can't get much, like, it's a metaphor, the thinest veiled metaphor ever.
Much more into the belly of the whale than a trash compactor.
But when Ben Kenobi dies, and is, I think, the moment of transformation for Luke Skywalker, when he leaves behind the childhood.
His old life.
He might have left Tatooine, but he hadn't left Tatooine yet. This is him on his own when he starts transforming into the hero we know.
Exactly.
Of course, they're in the Death Star. They had the meeting with the goddess, with Leia. So
one or two more at least.
So the thing is, this makes a lot of what the hero with House faces is like the dealing with your father and mother, and how we will come to know that Darth Vader is Luke's father, but we don't know that yet. So really, Star Wars doesn't have much to do with it if you take it in isolation. But however, he goes to blow up the Death Star, which is, I would say, his first victory as an emerging hero.
Yes, right. Exactly.
And he does have the magic flight, which is, it's for him to escape the Death Star, it is requiring of the trickster figure to reappear in Han Solo,
or at least
who's the rogue archetype. And he does the final return to Yavin 4 or 5.
Wherever they get the fucking medal.
And they get the medal. So, as you can see, I hit a lot of points in the hero myth cycle. Yep, right there. And I would say that this, even though I do know that George Lucas intended to match the myth, it's obvious when you look at it. That there was a heavy influence.
Like I said, that's not obvious, but I think it's like, because he set out consciously, basically, like purposefully to do that. And it does hit, like you just said, like 7 or 8 points of the hero myth, like various facets of the hero's journey. I think it does a good job of doing that. Like it's clearly like, you can pick them out easily, and I think they're well integrated and they make sense. They're paced very well.
I would agree.
So I'm going to give, if not what I just said and what I just said, I think that's clearly
I think
if you didn't know that, it's a major theme, and it does its job very, very well because of like within that.
I think it's obvious that the themes of this movie are one of the strong points of it.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
And that was what George Lucas set out to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
When he was writing this, when he was writing this screenplay, and you know, it's not like a stretch to say that he wanted to make this something that was about setting up a modern myth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that obviously the fact that we're watching it and it's the
13
number 13 on the AFI Top 100 list.
And how many millions of nerds follow this myth, this fictional myth?
There's a religion.
He succeeded. He succeeded.
Exactly.
Whatever George Lucas has done since then, notwithstanding, I think that he succeeded in
call this stuff his body of
starting
work.
Star Wars and making this film and making this beginning to a larger thing that he wanted to do. I think he succeeded.
If anything, he was too successful.
Yeah,
and his own
it worked too well
to the point where he could not control it anymore. And when he attempted to add to his own mythology or to his own myth,
it was shit.
People tore it apart.
Yeah, his followers, like he was like the mythological like head of the figure, the like quote unquote religion, and then as you said, it's really funny. It worked too well, and he tried to change things. They're like, nope, we like it the way we like it. You can go fuck off.
Yeah, but
I know what you're saying. Like that's just a humorous thing.
Well, it doesn't matter. We're not talking about the other ones.
Exactly.
Anyway,
I'm giving themes a very strong one.
I'm giving themes a 1. 1,
and it was Athena. You were correct.
All right,
Athena. It was correct.
So let's move on to antagonists. That's going to be me. So, like, the Empire is the real antagonist here, but Darth Vader is the personification of the Empire. Darth Vader is awesome as the personification of the Empire. And not so much, like, Darth Vader is great in this movie. Don't get me wrong. He's better in later movies, but we're not talking about those. Once again, we're not talking about those.
And this one in isolation.
I think that he does a good job of showing what the Empire can be. And, like, showing kind of the evilness of the Empire.
Exactly.
And but at the same time, you get the idea that Darth Vader wasn't always all bad, which kind of makes it even darker.
Hint at it,
which kind of makes it even darker, right? Like
it's even more tragic.
It's not like evil is born into you. It's like evil is something that arrives.
You arrive at evil because of your experiences, more or less,
because of like your life experiences or whatever.
Or you have the risk of doing so.
Right.
One who doesn't become the world redeemer can
becomes
take
the
place
world
of a tyrant.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's exactly what happens in this case. I don't have too much to say about Darth Vader. I love Darth Vader, and the Empire as a dark enemy, I guess, is really good, but they're the best when they have I'll say this with hard air quotes, face, right? Because you never see Darth Vader's face, but like when they
He's
have
their
a face
mascot.
of the darkness to sell, and like that's what I love about the Empire is that yes, the Empire is fucked up, and like you don't really know that much about the Empire in this movie.
You know enough though that they're bad. Yeah,
other
they're
than
evil.
Darth Vader is like this fucking douchebag.
Sure.
And like you get so much more about Darth Vader in other shit later, but in this movie, Darth Vader's just kind of a douchebag, and like he's a great villain.
I agree. Yeah.
What's interesting about Darth Vader in this film is that yes, he's a face of but he's one of the faces of the Empire.
Sure.
And
You see the bureaucracy
here's the thing.
for sure.
You see and I'll get to that in a second. But
God
like,
damn it,
Darth Vader is, in a way, just like Obi-Wan Kenobi is the representation of like the good use of the Force, which they just introduced in this, as this is the first movie.
Instance of it.
But Darth Vader comparing Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader in their roles, you get to see what, like, again, Darth Vader is a much more imposing figure than the kind of elderly hermit that is Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Sure.
And I think that Tarkin is perhaps
GMT?
the best face
Notorious
the Empire
GMT?
ever had. And they set a really high standard with this first movie, with showing like just kind of the smug, like their comfort with power and their comfort with destruction.
Of course. And you haven't done this to me in a while, but you just did it now. I was going to bring up, like, Tarkin had to have been mentioned because he's like, Vader and him are like the two sides, like the bureaucracy side of it and like the scary, like supernatural side, right?
Yeah.
But like they're basically the Empire's like logo, like mascots. So like, right? So like as exemplified by them, you see why they're basically like they're space Nazis in space. Like I've always said that, and it's somewhat joking.
Well, that's why their troops are called stormtroopers.
Yes, of course.
But
I'm just saying, like, just real quickly, I'll let you talk. But I do agree. I'll let you finish. I'll let you finish about Star Wars. But no, but you're right, and I agree. Like, I don't have much more to say either, but we have to mention both of them because they represent two sides of the same, like, overarching, like, crushing, like, jackboot on your face of the galaxy, essentially.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Well, it's interesting because Vader gets all this kind of exposition from like Obi-Wan and so forth. And you get an idea for Tarkin, discussing the bureaucracy and threatening to kill her. But nothing says more about Tarkin than when she's
your favorite line in anything ever. Yes,
yeah.
Go on.
Well, I mean, it's important though. Is she's when he she gives the rebel base location. He's like, see, Lord Vader, she can be reasonable, and. She's like, what? And he goes, you're far too trusting. I mean, it's just
no, he says proceed as planned or whatever.
No,
which means fire on Alderaan.
Yeah, but he also says you're far too trusting.
You may fire when ready. What?
Right. And then exactly.
And then but when he says you're far too trusting, that speaks so I mean, yeah, we'll get into a dialogue.
Sure.
But that just says so much about his character.
And the Empire at large.
Yeah.
So I'm giving him a 1.
And
effective antagonist.
And I was wondering, about man versus fate. Could fate be because they talk about fate and destiny a lot in this film, and could it be one of these where fate can be an antagonist? Oh, I'm asking you because you and I always go for the bigger.
No, but I mean, like, that might be in themes, but like I see what you mean. Like, you can get that out of it. Certainly, like, you can see that aspect variously throughout the film. I'm not sure how big of a part it is in general, but it's mentioned, and at least again you can extract it. Sure. But I'll give an antagonist a 1 because everything we just said.
Yeah, I think we're all going to give it a 1, right?
Yeah,
the Empire might be one of the greatest antagonists of all time.
So that's going to lead us to protagonist with Ian.
Okay, so Luke Skywalker, admittedly, is a
whiny piece of shit.
Yes,
starts out as such at least,
and he grows. Because we were joking about his whininess so much that I actually paid attention to see that if after Kenobi died, how would his whining go down? And it did.
It did. Yeah. That's true.
So
right.
Here's the thing: this is a classic hero character. I mean, there's nothing particularly unique to differentiate Luke Skywalker from any of real other classic hero characters, but I don't think that was the intention of Luke Skywalker.
That's sort of the whole point, really. Yeah, exactly.
He was
every man,
kid who started nowhere, was sent out on an adventure, went through some trials, and ended up like saving the day, and that's really it. And you know what? That's fine. Although there is also an argument that R2-D2 and C-3PO are the actual protagonists of this. But I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, so I'm just going to say Luke Skywalker, and because it matches, because the intent was to create a classic myth structure, and it succeeds, it gets the 1 for me.
I appreciate that, but I'm going to go the opposite way. I think that Luke Skywalker is the weakest part of this movie. Not that I don't like Luke Skywalker in Star Wars as a whole, but in this movie, Luke is a whiny, just annoying character.
At least to begin with. I know. Go on.
And-
So were all of us when we started our
Yes.
journeys.
And
All heroes
there's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that it makes for a bad,
An annoying protagonist.
annoying
Perhaps.
protagonist
I see what
in
you
the
mean.
beginning, and that's fine. He's got so much more of his hero's journey to go through at the end of this movie, which is fine. And I'm interested to see
Yes.
where this goes. However, if we're just talking about this movie, in this flick, I think that Luke is kind of a shitty protagonist. And he stumbles upon heroism at every turn.
That's a really funny phrase.
and
the way to put it.
I cannot give him credit for that.
It's
I
difficult.
thought you were going to say stumbles upon heroin. I'm like,
No, that's
This
awesome.
is probably the only zero I'm going to give this movie.
That's really interesting. Go on.
But he does it's just this like him being dragged by the nose into becoming a hero in this movie.
At first, but that's the hero to go ahead.
Except that at the last scene of this, the attack upon the Death Star, he's not being dragged into this. He's actually dragging
He's
other
driving
people
it.
into
Yeah.
He
He's,
is. He is, but honestly, I don't see that as his own. See, like at this point, I don't see this as his own thing. Like I see this as his this is my, this is what I have to do. You know, like this is how I avenge my aunt and uncle.
He literally
Like-
has nowhere else to go as well.
Exactly.
So, but
Like I don't see this as him being a hero. I see it as him saying, I don't give a shit anymore, and this is what I have to do.
actually,
It's
I
a
know
very
that's not
cynical
true
view, but
because Han Solo gave him a way out, and he chooses against that way out.
Kind of.
Yeah.
But for his own edification, he's never going to take that way out. Right? Like he would just feel bad. Like this is him
Sure.
giving up if he goes with Han Solo, which he cannot do as the person that he is. He's not allowed to do that.
Sure, I get what you mean. Like it's really funny, but
Then it would be no.
Yeah.
You're allowed your opinion.
it's funny. It's funny.
I
It's,
disagree.
it's
with
really
you.
funny, Steve. I don't have much to say, but it's interesting that because I was somewhat debating of what to give the actual hero of this modern hero myth, score wise. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be because yes, he starts out perhaps a bit unrelatable or a bit unlikable.
Right.
We'll say, but that's sort of like you've seen that in other myths, and even in the myths we read a bit in Hero itself.
Yeah.
They were not always that. But because he's supposed to, and I think does, achieve the exemplification of the hero figure, that's why he's going to get a 1 at the end of the day, even if he starts off a little rocky, we'll say.
Well,
Alright.
I was going to say he's only really whiny in relation to people because when he's on his own, when they're looking for R2-D2 and he thinks he sees the Fremen, the Sand People, and he goes out there, he's like, "Come on, let's take a look. Come on." He's kind of he's trying to take
He
control.
takes
of the
somewhat of an initiative, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
it's inside of him. It's just when people are trying to oppress him, he gets whiny. He never stands up to his uncle, but he's like, "Oh, it's gonna be a whole nother year." But when he's on his own, he got up and looked for R2-D2. He went out.
He takes initiative, we'll say.
Yeah, I mean,
I
like
said.
when R2-D2 is gone, yeah, he said, he's going to get in trouble, whatever. But I mean, the thing is, when he's in isolation or when he's with people that, let's say, can't really judge him, I think he takes on initiative. Even when he goes to check his aunt and uncle, he kind of like is pretty sure he's going to dive into the fire, but he is compelled to do it. I mean, he's ready to go there and risk all, and with the hopes of maybe saving him. What I'm saying is the hero is inside of him. It's just when he's around some kind of parental figure that he gets whiny.
It's oppressed tyranny.
I don't. All right, I'm just gonna say it. I don't think that the hero is not inside of him.
Sure.
I just think that he is a weak hero as far as stories go.
That's
He
fair.
blew up the Death Star.
Yeah, sure.
and he decided to dive in and rescue the
Anybody
princess.
can do anything if you write it. It doesn't
guess.
matter. Like there's
I guess. I see what you mean, Steve-O. For sure. I do. In all seriousness.
Yeah, I mean, there's just something about his character that is not present that I need to be present in a protagonist in a movie to make it a good movie. Sure. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen for Mark Hamill eventually in Star Wars, but what I'm saying is it doesn't happen in this movie.
Fair enough. Like,
so I'm gonna give it a 0.
I'm still giving it a 1, and like sort of my classic thing. I see what you mean. So on that front, I usually cut it up like I think 30%, yeah, weak, whiny, etc., but 70% effective, fine, a good protagonist.
All right, sounds good. So 1, 1, 1.
1.
All right, sounds good, guys. We're gonna move on to supporting character with Scott.
With me. Oh yeah, so like the classic, C-3PO and R2-D2, like the classic droids. I would say are like the big ones. I guess
these are the droids you're looking for.
These are the droids we're talking about. And of course, although we talked about her a bit, Leia is a huge, a very like important side character that drives a lot of the story. And in fact, she herself takes initiative, even though yes, that like in any other hero journey, like you might not have seen that. She at least at points. I know you just made a face at me, but like she's the one who figures
not
out
for the reason you think.
She's the fine. But I will go on for a second. She's the one who figures out, or at least decides to blast a hole so they can get into the garbage chute, like to escape. And also, when they're getting crushed by it, she is the most level-headed one. Mm-hmm. A lot of her ideas and plans are perfectly logical, and she guides them along. She's almost more knowledgeable, like more worldly. Maybe her and Han are about equal. She's certainly more knowledgeable and worldly than Luke himself. So,
here's what I was referring to when I said
hit me with it
not
now.
What you think. If I had convinced myself to make Leia a protagonist, I probably would have made protagonist a 1.
Yeah, no,
this might be a perfect movie for me. However, I looked at Leia as a supporting character, and I think I'm gonna stick with that. I'm going to blame it on all you guys for not convincing me that Leia was a protagonist.
I was going
sure.
The thing is,
your character flaws to pass everything.
Here's the thing.
She kind of might be.
You're right.
She could be.
I thought about making that very argument. However, at the end of the day, she just isn't. Like I don't know what to tell you.
I agree with you. I don't think that she is, and like now I'm thinking back on it, I'm like, maybe I could have convinced myself that she was, but that's not what happened. And what did happen is that
she's a stronger secondary.
She's a supporting character for me, and she is if we're going off of our standard, pick your strongest supporting character. She's obviously the strongest supporting character.
Of course.
I think it's an obvious move. Maybe Han.
Well, I was going to speak about him too.
Maybe Han,
next.
But I think that Leia.
Since I get secondary,
I think that Leia.
She's up there for sure.
I think that Leia is the strongest supporting character.
I would say.
I think that she makes. I think that she makes moves that dwarf Han's
she makes
moves.
well-informed, intelligent moves, and he does too. But he's more of like a wild card, if you will. Like he's more of the roguish character, or the archetype, as you said earlier. So yeah, of course, like another most, the two human famous ones, if you will, and of course Chewie's there as Han's partner. Like that's fine. Like again, he's a famous, iconic character, but does he do much? He's in a couple of firefights, and he plays the game against R2-D2. Sure.
Yeah, Chewie's just fun, really.
Yeah.
Han is amazing.
He's a fan favorite, but again,
Leia is amazing.
I'll say it this
they're
way.
both terrific fucking supporting characters. Like, supporting characters are getting the strongest of ones, probably.
Agreed,
in this,
of course. And I'll just finish up
movie.
with Han and Leia are, like, both very competent within their little, like, ranges, what they know about, and that helps the hero, Luke, accomplish his journey.
If we judge secondary characters on their ability to surrender at a moment's notice,
which was also
C-3PO all the way.
Also a drinking game.
C-3PO all the way.
We invented a new one. Every time C-3PO gives up and says, "Oh, yes, sir. Yes, anything you want, sir. You take a drink." Go on.
That man or that robot.
That robot man.
And again, I love R2-D2. He has a lot of personality for not saying anything, but I think it's the same argument you can make about Chewbacca. That it's
sure.
Like I don't think yet at this moment in this tale they transcend to where
anything beyond
would end up. But
they're still enjoyable. Is all I'm saying.
And then
they're fun characters. They don't really have an arc. R2D2 to a certain extent.
They get
maybe,
shot
but,
up
like,
a lot. That's
Definitely
their
not
arc.
Chewbacca at this point.
I was gonna say I always saw them as like the Greek chorus. I mean, they were they kind of.
That's interesting. I like that.
I mean, they always provided you kind of like that level of exposition, like that was outside away from like our heroes, so to speak. So I don't really think
That's
they
fair.
needed so much of an arc because they were plot devices who happened to be charismatic. They developed their own character,
Sure.
but they were more of a plot device in a lot of ways.
I'll say one more thing. That you just said that phrase reminded me. And traditionally, perhaps before this, Leia could have been a plot device unto herself, right? What is
Yeah.
that? Yes. So she almost is. They ostensibly come to rescue her, and she ends up, if not ironically, but reversely rescuing them, like more or
Right,
less. Leading
exactly. That's what I love
she
about
leads her own
Princess Leia.
fucking rescue attempt.
Yeah.
So anyway, L secondary gets a 1 from me. Very strong 1.
I agree.
Yep.
And just one last thing. I don't think we mentioned it. Obi-Wan Kenobi. And
Yeah.
Alex Guinness, I think.
True.
Was the
Yep.
actor.
Sir
yeah.
Alex Guinness.
Whoa.
And what about
Alec Guinness.
Alec
Sorry.
Guinness.
Alec.
You're right. You're
But
right.
the thing I noticed about Alec
You're right.
Guinness is when you look at him and Peter Cushing, you know, 2 seasoned actors, let's say for pretty much everybody, that the looks they give, just their body language in this movie says so much. Oh, shut
They're
up.
using the Force to enhance their unholy acting talents.
Yeah, no,
We'll say.
honestly, I noticed that they were really good.
You're right.
And like,
They're almost
kinda-
like stage actors.
they very much
Yeah,
set
very
themselves
much.
apart from
Yes.
And they
even-
both used to be
even,
in
like,
Hammer horror films.
even
so.
Mark Hamill, who was unseasoned at this point, or like Carrie Fisher,
Young up and
who
coming.
was
Sure.
unseasoned at this point. Like, you could tell who were the really good actors and
Mhm.
who were the actors that were just going on their charisma, basically. Which isn't to say that the actors that were going on charisma were bad, but you could tell the difference in acting ability if you're looking for it.
Sure.
For sure.
And again, one quick thing. We'll just lump in like the Mos Eisley scene, like all the little aliens, all that recognizable stuff goes into secondary, and
And let's not forget
More evidence.
Biggs and Wedge.
yeah, sure. And
Yeah,
Porkins.
forget
May they rest in peace.
Porkins.
And Porkins. May they rest in peace.
Wedge is
Exactly.
alive.
May he
Biggs
rest in peace.
dead.
Doesn't matter if he's
Biggs
dead or alive.
dies.
He was there in the film, and they were fine.
By the way, what cruel person named that character Porkins?
What kind of
Maybe it was the
asshole?
actor himself.
Yeah.
We'll
listen,
discuss later.
This
but-
is in a galaxy far, far away and a long time ago. They're definitely dead by now. So it does. May
Either
they rest
way.
in peace.
secondary 1.
Anyway, let's move it on to Dialogue
Dialogue is.
with Chris.
I love the dialogue in this. It is not poetry.
I know
It is-
you've been saying
No,
it.
I mean, but
You've been
it's,
saying the dialogue all night.
Yeah, I did. Krista Krenko.
Yes, thank you. Wotani, go.
But the thing is, it's the dialogue, but it's also the delivery of the dialogue. Like a lot's said and very little. Like when Tarkin walks in and they're when the governors, let's say on the Death Star, are talking about, you know, how about the station versus like how the Empire is constructed. And they're talking about the Imperial Senate, and then he walks in and he's like, the Imperial Senate will no longer be, you know, the Emperor's dispelled it. And he's like, well, how will the Emperor maintain control without the bureaucracy, blah, blah, blah. And they said so much about the world they're in, you know, and, you
I
know,
see what you mean.
Alec Guinness is, Obi-Wan's about the whole, you know, the old republic before the dark times, before the Empire. My whole point is, aside from the quippy language, which I really like when, you know, she's like, you know, you got in here. Didn't you think about a way to get out?
Mostly
you know,
Han and Leia's the quippiness.
yeah, but I mean, say, that's all clever. But what I'm saying
I'm gonna boil that down to
unlike me, the economy of dialogue
Mm-hmm.
in order to get
You're
exposition
saying
out.
is well used.
No, yeah, I have no economy. Brevity
Clearly.
is not one of my strong suits.
You have no soul or wit.
Jesus.
Anyways.
But anyway, I'm gonna boil a lot of the Han Leia dialogue down to Harrison Ford's charisma because I
Sure.
think that's basically what it
runs
what
on.
it comes down to.
yeah.
And not only that's unfair. Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher's charisma, they both have charisma to spare, and like I think that dialogue is not all that good, but the fact that it's the two of them delivering it makes it way, way better than it actually is. I think that dialogue for me is going to be a 1, but it's going to be a close thing. Like, the dialogue in this movie is not amazing, but the way that it's delivered by basically all of the actors except for Mark Hamill is really good. And like and the way that it comes off, like this is a very quotable movie, strangely enough. For
is it quotable? Though?
Exactly, you go on.
It is. I honestly, like,
first,
so there are several points where I, having seen this movie probably 4,000 or 5,000 times less than Chris.
Quoting. It's
exactly.
I like Star Wars. You like Star Wars. We talked about Star Wars. We've seen Star Wars a lot. Oh,
there's
this
a lot of
line
movies.
is amazing because
there's a lot of movies I'm nostalgic about that I cannot quote.
Yeah, but that's why Disney created an entire movie, Rogue One, about the nostalgia people had.
And I can't quote that movie.
Wars.
But what I can quote is...
But they reference like the two guys from the bar in there, where it's like, the thing is like, this is a very... I don't know if... I have a really hard time judging the dialogue in this because I know it so well. Just by either... like from a Family Guy or Robot Chicken, like mocking it.
All the Saturdays and post-sides.
But here's the thing: it's been that run over by popular culture for a reason, right? It's not because
but go on.
No, definitely. Like it's not like I don't. That's the best argument I can give it. It's not the best goddamn dialogue in the world. I am not going to argue that by any means.
No.
But what I can say is that this movie is memorable. And the dialogue is definitely a part of that. There are movies that are memorable, and the dialogue is like, I don't give a shit about the dialogue at all. It was all about the action scenes, or it was all about like something else. Like, this movie is memorable, and the dialogue is a part of it. The part, like, the talking about the Force is huge. Like, Alec Guinness's, like, you know, Obi-Wan's death scene is huge. Like, you remember that stuff that is said during that. And yeah, maybe it's mostly because of how impactful the thing that's happening on the screen is, but the dialogue is caught up in that. And like, that's why I'm giving it a 1.
You made a very impassioned argument because I was coming into this going to give it a soft 0. But I completely see what you mean. For sure, yeah, it's like almost pop culturally, like everyone has absorbed it or have heard at least some of the most famous things from the original Star Wars. Yes, that's true, but does it make it good? Like, it's almost like I can go either way. Like, it's a literal 50-50 split because I see what you mean. Like,
here's what I'll say.
At the time,
it's definitely not bad.
Right? But is it fucking amazing?
No one's going to say this is bad, I don't think.
I'm not saying it's... You're right, it's average.
At no point in this movie is it cringeworthy.
Characters saying what they basically need...
I don't think.
...need to say, sure. And then every now and again you'll get like the, you know, like... You strike me down, I should become powerful than before. All that crap.
And it's memorable. Like
some of it is.
I'm saying it's really tough not now. It's not great dialogue.
You made a more convincing argument,
but it's good enough for me to give
Chris
it a
has
point.
To say about it before I decide.
I was gonna.
Although I know what you're going to give it, I know what you're voting.
No, obviously, but to kind of like, oh fuck you.
Go on.
But to build on my point from before, when I saw this when I was 7 years old. A lot of things got by me. Like my favorite line, "You're far too trusting," you know.
Sure, you couldn't understand it or
right,
the implications.
But as I got older, as I started understanding narrative, I really appreciated those things I didn't pick up when I was a kid. So for me, you know, I mean, I'm sure we all saw this whenever it was when we were kids. But for me, as I got older and started understanding what a bureaucracy was, how governments were run, you know, that the empire and rebellion were not, two states at war with each other, that this was an overarching.
Sure.
But that's why I said with all this expository dialogue that they had to get out, they said it in very little and it was always with actions. I don't, it is quotable to me. But I mean, in terms of being able to say a lot with very little, and something that, you know, I've learned over the years as I've understood narrative and I understood the world, on that alone, I think it deserves a 1.
I don't know, man. It's really close. It's tight.
You two seem
I might give it the softest 0 in the world. I'm still leaning towards a 0. While you guys made
Ian, what do you think?
Very impassioned arguments, it seems like you might be on my side, E.
I started off. Steve-O, you convinced me. The problem is, I'm really, like, again, I'm really unsure of how to judge this movie. because
it's harsh because of that fact. Yeah.
the fact that
Sure.
I know it so well, and I don't want to give it a. I always caution on the side of a worse score when judging things, and I kind of wanted to give things zeros for the sake of
Not
the
being a
deconstruction
fanboy.
of Star Wars
Mm.
and saying
sure.
that, and because generally
I get you.
I despise nostalgia, and I don't want to, and I like this as a child, so thus
It's
it
still
can't
good.
be a
yeah.
10 because of what I viewed it as through more innocent eyes. However, I still enjoy watching it. I can still enjoy the journey. And the dialogue might not be good. It might be good. I don't know. I can't. I literally cannot judge.
It's hard to separate.
So I have
Exactly,
to give.
yeah.
So I actually have to. I think it would be dishonest to me for giving it a 0, because of what you pointed out. That there's no. I don't look at the dialogue and say what a terrible line or what. Like even if it is bad dialogue, people are having fun making this movie, except for Alec Guinness, which I think who hated this.
Who hated it, but
still did a
delivered the best
professional
performance
job.
in the
Yeah.
movie.
Well, if one of these, sure.
And so I'm going to side on a soft 1, but still nonetheless a 1.
All right, you guys convinced me. I'm going to come down also on a soft 1. I was pretty much wavering, but the point about it being like, yeah, it is difficult to separate our psychological nostalgia for it and knowing it so well. But is it like, again, as objectively as possible, viewing it as such? Is it? No, it's perfectly fine. Again, I would use the term serviceable, and in fact, you're right. At points of when the actors are using all the charisma that they have to deliver the lines, it sort of pushes it over the edge. So enough credit. I'll give it a 1 at the end of the day. But I was not going into this.
All right.
But your passion, you forced convinced me. You will be giving this question a 1, so sure.
That one took a lot out of me. I won't lie.
All right. Well, I think the next one might be an easy one
But
to
so that's
answer.
one's all around. We're gonna go into style, and that's gonna be on me. And I am going to tell you right off the bat that I'm gonna give the style on this movie a 1. It's kind of the first of its kind in a lot of ways.
Sort of. It built off what came before, but used it uniquely.
So I'll start with things that like it copied from other movies that were really good. There were a lot of great shots in this movie that like reminded me of films that came before, or like even shortly before. Like when did this come out?
77.
77. When did that doesn't matter.
Vacuum, Steve-O, vacuum.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But like there were a lot of shots that like reminded me of other movies.
Sure.
But they were still really well done. So that was great. The cinematography was terrific.
Exactly, yeah.
Kind of there was a whole new way of making sci-fi that happened with this movie that was brilliant. And you'll see things from this movie
Used
with
everywhere.
a lot of
sure.
sci-fi later on, which is brilliant. I'm actually going to not talk about music because I know Chris has a lot to say about the music in this movie.
I will also leave that for you.
Okay, I just want to build off of one thing you said.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important, is because even with my beloved Star Trek, most science fiction, if not all science fiction up until this point, was very clean, very sterile. This was the first one that at least got prominence where you had a complete lived-in world. I don't think after this you saw a complete lived-in world in science fiction like Alien. I think to what you were saying, I think it pushed aesthetically a lot of boundaries.
And there was a very obvious reference to that right in the beginning of this movie when C-3PO comes in and he's like, "Oh, I'm completely I'm stuffed with dirt or whatever." Like I just
My joints are frozen.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of a non-line in terms of anything else, except for the fact that what you just said,
It's
like,
world building, yeah.
everything has been very sterile, very
Clinical, maybe,
unlived
perhaps.
in
Yeah.
before that, and like that brings the world that he has come into his like physical space, his physical being.
And that was cool about the Rebel blockade runner was it began with a white sterile hallway, and then the Empire comes in and starts
Yeah.
fucking things up.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know. There's just so much about the style of this movie that's really good and like just different than everything else that had come before it. And the way that they did all of the fight scenes and the
Space
ship
battles,
and
yeah.
stuff like that like was so fucking cool. And like stuff that had never been done or like never even been thought of before this movie happened.
Sure.
I don't know. I just love it for that.
No.
Obviously I'm giving style one, but like
I agree. I think style, like, my comments will be brief, that yes, it's one of the easiest questions to give a 1 to for Star Wars, and I'll leave music, of course, for you, but yeah, that's iconic, and as you said, Steve-O, the cinematography, the shots were gorgeous to behold at times, and yes, they're very innovative of what they used, like how they got some of the shots, and yeah, it's iconic, and I said this about Rogue One, but it starts here, obviously. The world building is very, very well done, like the things
So
you guys
good.
were both
Yeah.
saying just now. So that's my evidence for giving it a pretty solid to strong 1, even without taking into account the score, which you will probably talk about in a second.
Yeah.
Or E.
Half of your million should go to John Williams.
Yeah, exactly.
Epic rap battles of history. But yeah, that's it. I'll let you talk about it. Score.
No, you go ahead and start. I can always build on whatever you say, please.
he's got so much more to
I
say.
said everything.
That is his point.
I'm just gonna say about the score. When the score came out, it was like it was a double record. But I mean,
Was it?
Yeah, it was.
Go on, all right.
That way back when.
Keep going.
2 vinyls.
Yeah, but I also have the double CD when they released the full score from beginning to end.
Why wouldn't you?
But Williams was really inspired by Wagner, who was really, music as narrative. And you can close your eyes, and you can close your eyes. If you know this movie, you can close your eyes and listen to the whole score and
See the scenes.
Know what scene is happening.
yeah, but you see the scene. But I mean, that is such an apt thing in the rap battles. Like you owe your half your millions to John Williams because the music carries it so much. And as a musician, this was the film that started me on the road to that.
Sure.
The score.
Absolutely.
Ironically, Wagner was heavily influenced by myth. So
And Nazis.
Yeah, Wagner wrote
ties
beautiful
together.
music, but he was a horrible person.
So it all ties together. But I'm giving the style 1, regardless of other connotations and so forth.
I think
I'm sorry for Wagner. Wagner was a
But
Nazi.
style 1's all around.
Yeah.
But his
Despite
music was
the
epic.
of the
Yeah.
Wagner ties.
Mythical music is epic. Especially
That's
in
going to
Star
bring us
Wars.
to
Well,
recommend.
like Wagner's not collecting royalties, so
He's collecting dust is what he's collecting.
he's dead for a long time now.
he's
Go
pushing
on.
up daisies.
Don't worry, that Nazi's dead. Anyway, recommendation, Ian. Hold on, wait for
Chris is force choking
No,
himself.
no, go ahead. Yeah, please.
yes. I mean, it's weird. Again, this entire review has been really
Yes,
weird.
it's difficult to cut up for sure.
And I don't know how honest my score will be at the end of this, but I can't think of anything I want to do. This is a heavily influential film. If you're into film, like, you have seen Star Wars,
exactly.
or you've seen, if you haven't seen the movie itself, you've seen enough pop culture references to it that you've seen
might have well
each
have
of the
seen it,
scenes independently.
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily the best film of all time. I don't know if it deserves, what was it, 13 on the. But then again, it's AFI doesn't judge in a vacuum. AFI judges on how a film
Influences others.
influenced
Yeah. Sure.
culture. And Star Wars is perhaps one of the most influential pieces of popular culture in
Sure,
the history of the world.
Yeah. At least in our modern age.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, yeah, I think it's an important work to see if you're an American, it's an important work to see to understand America in a way. And that's a weird thing to say, but it is. It's part of, like, It's
ingrained
in being
in
the
people,
in becoming an American myth.
Exactly.
So,
God damn it again. But that's basically the point that I was going to give. Yes, of course I recommend it. And if you haven't seen Star Wars, I don't know who the fuck you are. But,
Who the hell are
I said
you?
something like that on Rogue One or whatever. But to that point, yes, it's become so hugely influential. And like, even if you have no idea about Joseph Campbell and hero mythology and so forth, you could see this film and be like, oh, it's a modern, like you can get the mythological aspects out of it, even if you have no knowledge whatsoever about that topic going into it. And yes, it's a very well done sci-fi story, like, alternate sort of universe story. I don't know what to say. Like, it's and I guess the question we ask ourselves: does it hold up still? Yes, it does. So yeah,
Definitely.
still worth watching Star Wars. I don't know what to tell you.
As I think I made clear with the dialogue, 40 years later, and this film still
Chris does not
marvelous.
recommend it.
No, it's marvelous to me because it's one of those things where, given aesthetically the time it was in before CG, and this was actually a very low budget movie even by those standards.
Sure.
And the things they're able to pull off, just with what they had, I'm marveled by it. And it's aside from just the little cues and dialogue and so forth. So yeah, I'm going to give it the strongest recommendation. As Scott said, if you haven't seen it, where have you been? And Ian, I thought of this, given your Russian literature, my grandfather, this thing was in the theater for like 2 years. And my grandfather took my sister and I to see it like the 10th time we had seen it. And we walked out of the theater. I'm like, what'd you think? And he's like, well, it's not my cup of tea. What's that? He goes, I like Dr. Zhivago better.
Sure. Perhaps you rate Dr.
And I was
Zhivago
like
higher
thinking,
than Star
Ian,
Wars.
with you and your Russian literature, I thought.
Very nice.
Well,
nice callback.
thank you.
I'm
So what do we got here?
I'm gonna give it a recommendation.
Mhm.
I think that this movie, if you haven't seen it, that's fucking weird. Like it's just a movie that everybody has seen, and there's a reason for it. It still holds up,
Yeah, like I said.
but it strangely holds up more than possibly it should. Even
You're right. It's
just
long-
because
yeah.
it has
that's well
it
phrased,
has this
Steve-O.
weird place in the zeitgeist of culture
Mhm.
that is just so strong, and like there's, I'm sure, a very good reason for that.
At least that's part of the
and
aspect.
yes,
One of the hugest aspects.
Ian, you're absolutely right.
It's built on
I was kind of going around to that, where it's like, it's literally
It resonates
just,
so much because it
on
uses so many
every
aspects.
point of like what myths are and like what myths have always been,
Yep.
and I think that's right. I think that's kind of why everybody fucking loves this movie, and that's it.
That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I mean
Sure.
that's basically it. So I think unless anybody has any final thoughts,
No, I want you to give us the scores.
close off here.
What do we
So we got the scores going on here. It's going to be, strangely enough, Scott and myself give this a 9, and Chris gives it a 10, and
Obviously, going into it. Yeah.
Ian, I'm surprised
I am too.
you also gave it a 10.
He did say he wasn't sure how honest his scores are going to be, but perhaps there was most honest.
It might realistically
ever.
be a 2. I'm not sure, because here's the thing: is I can't.
Theoretically, you were going to give it a 9, and then I made it a super impassioned
Sure.
That's true.
speech
Well,
and
I
changed
was
your mind.
fighting for a place to give it a 0 before.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: is if I went in with fresh eyes, I might be able to pick out the narrative flaws in this.
Difficult to say, though.
But-
Sure.
I can't. I am. This is what I am, and
It
so
does.
It's a 10.
It does have a place in everybody's memory. Really, anybody who's like grown up that's our age or close to it knows this movie from childhood, and that affects how you see it.
Sure.
So
I can't say much
anyway,
else than that.
it's
yeah.
going to be a 9.5
Yep.
from
That's
us
pretty much about right.
at the Lost
That-
Signals.
That's fine.
and that's going to wrap it up. So I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, here with Jonathan E. Menzer.
They blew it up. God damn you!
I'm going to go to Scott last, as always. Chris Morgan.
May the force be with you.
And Scott Thurlow.
And this is the podcast you're looking for. See you next time.
Have a good night.
We hope you've enjoyed your stay.
MOTSterpiece Theatre.
Join us again next time, won't you?
MOTSterpiece Theatre.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
MOTSterpiece